In the greatest message ever preached, the Sermon on the Mount, Jesus said, "You are the salt of the earth. You are the light of the world." Say it with me. You are the... Continues in Matthew chapter 5, verses 13 through 16. You are the salt of the earth, but if the salt loses its saltiness, how can it be made salty again? It's no longer good for anything except to be thrown out, trampled by men. You are the light of the world. A city on a hill cannot be hidden. Neither do people light a lamp and put it under a bowl. Instead, they put it on its stand, and it gives light to everyone in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before men, that they may see your good deeds and praise your Father in heaven. That is our desire here at Connect, to be a city on a hill that's seen and not hidden, to be light, to be salt. Maybe to those who have been hurt by life, maybe to those who have been hardened because of bad experiences with the church. But we realize we have an urgent alert, and that alert is simply to call people to the love and grace of Jesus Christ and to point them to this truth. Word on the street in Nashville is that if you need help, you go to the Ashwood Church. And what a great thing to be known by. If you need help, go to this church. Consequently, many people come off the street to the Ashwood Church with no notice. They come there for help. Rubel Shelby tells about an incident one Sunday night when a couple of greeters were shaking hands and greeting in the lobby when they noticed a young lady at the door that they'd never seen before. When the greeters went up to him and said, "Good to see you. We've never seen you before, I don't believe. I don't believe we've met." She very awkwardly said, "No, this is my first time here. Never been here before." The greeter reached out his hand and wanted to shake her hand, and she immediately pulled her hand back and stepped backwards. He thought, he said to her, "Is something wrong?" She said, "No." She says, I just really don't know that I should be here." He reached out his hand to put on her shoulder to kind of console her, and again she jerked back and said, "Sir, I don't believe you want to do that. I don't believe you know who I am. I'm a prostitute." This greeter was at a fork in the road. He had a choice to make, and he chose to look her right in the eyes and say, "No, listen, we want you here. We are all sinners. We all fall short. I'm so glad you're here. Let me take you and introduce you to my wife and to some others." He took her up towards the front, sat her down next to his wife, introduced her to some others, and that night, she gave her life to Jesus Christ. Why? All because somebody chose to sound the alert, to shine a light, and to be salt and point her towards the truth. I look out over this room week in and week out, and I see all kinds of different people. And sometimes I sit back and say, "God, you are so good that you bring this group of people together in this building to worship you." Because I look out, I see people from all different kinds of backgrounds. I see people with all different kinds of baggage that they've carried or that they're carrying. You know, one thing we all have in common is somewhere along the line, someone alerted us to the love of Jesus Christ. Somewhere along the line, somebody was salt, somebody was light, and they pointed us to the truth that there is a God in heaven who wants to have a relationship with me. And that's what we're about as a church. We're about doing everything that we can within the walls of this building and outside of the walls of this building to point people, to shine the light, to be salt, and say, "Listen, there is a God who loves you and wants to spend eternity with you." That's what our mission statement points us to. Read this with me. Our mission statement, our purpose: connecting people to Christ and each other. One more time. And you heard me say it, I'll say it a million times till I die, that we do that because we're all about taking as many people to heaven with us as we possibly can. Several years ago, Mercedes-Benz was running some commercials in which they were taking their cars and running them, crashing them into brick walls. The reason they were doing that is they were demonstrating their state-of-the-art technology and energy-absorbing body, which was effective in reducing injuries and saving lives in crashes. It's a design that was copied by almost every manufacturer in the world. When they were asked why didn't you keep that exclusive patent to yourself when you had it? An engineer from Mercedes-Benz said this: because in life, some things are just too important not to share. Because in life, some things are just too important not to share. You and I, as believers in Jesus Christ, as His church, have a message, and we have something that is far greater than Mercedes-Benz had. We have a message, we have a truth that will save lives not only here on this earth, but will save lives for all eternity. And it's up to us to share that. It's up to us individually to step up and be the salt and be the light that God calls us to be. I love the way the Message paraphrases this. It reads, you're here to be light, bringing out the God colors in the world. God is not a secret to be kept. We're going public with this, as public as a what? As a city on a hill. If I make you light bearers, you don't think I'm going to hide you under a bucket, do you? I'm putting you on a light stand. Now that I've put you there on a hilltop, on a light stand, shine, shine, shine. You ever read this passage and think, why did Jesus choose salt and light? I mean, He could have chosen a lot of different things for us to be. Why did He choose salt and light? Well, let's look at it a little bit. Let's characteristics of salt first. Why choose salt? Well, because first, salt seasons. Salt seasons. You ever had popcorn without salt? It's the nastiest stuff you ever want to eat. You know, I've been known to kind of, and I don't steal it, but I've been known earlier to take every theater has salt shakers. I've been known to kind of put that salt shaker in my pocket and go into the theater. Because when you get halfway through the popcorn, it stinks. You pull out the salt, you salt it up again, put the salt shaker back when you leave, right? How many are on salt-restricted diets? You act like you like it, but you can't stand it. It's a miserable life. Mrs. Dash just isn't the same, is she? Salt is salt. Salt seasons. And by the way, you're getting some pretzels. Don't eat those yet. Eat those, I'll tell you when you can eat those. Thanks, guys. But hang on to those just for a moment, and I'll let you know when that time is. Salt adds zest to life. Salt adds zing to life. Jesus is saying, you're the salt of the earth. That means you're to add a little zing. You're to add a little zest to life. You're to bring spice into other people's lives, enthusiasm into other people's lives. You're to make a difference there. You know what I think is going to happen to some Christians? I think some Christians are going to get to heaven. God's going to greet them at the gate, and He's going to say, you know what? I didn't mean for you to have such a crummy life. Because you've acted all your life like it's been a crummy life. He says, I came into your life, I moved into your life so that you could add zing to life. You could add zest to other people's lives. Then my enthusiasm, my spirit could leak out of you and onto them. I came for you to make an impact, to make a difference. For all, John 10:10, Jesus said, I have come that they may have life and have it miserably. Right? No, I've come that they may have life and have it what? To the full, that they would add zing to the people around them. Another is salt creates thirst. Salt creates thirst. Why do you think bars and different places have free pretzels and free peanuts out there? Go ahead, eat a pretzel, please. Go ahead and eat a pretzel. See somebody not eating one, tell them to eat it. Dealt with that last service. If you're not going to eat it, act like you're eating it. This is a participation thing. Go ahead, have a pretzel. Eat it up. Eat that pretzel. While you're eating that, I'm going to drink my water. You get the point? Salt creates thirst. Salt creates thirst. And if you're serious about being the salt of the earth, then God is saying, listen, if you're really salt, then you ought to make the people around you thirsty for me, God says. You ought to make the people around you thirsty for God, thirsty for what you have. You ever been around somebody that just is enthusiastic, filled with joy, filled with God, and you just want to be around them all the time? You know anybody like that? I've told you before, when I was in junior high and high school, I had the unique ability to have 1 foot in the darkness and live here, and 1 foot in the light. I could be who I wanted to be with this crowd and go like crazy, or I could be the little Christian over here and be with this crowd. Either one, it's an exhausting life, by the way. But I could live 2 lives at once. That was until I was a sophomore in high school and things began to dramatically change. I used to sing in the choir, believe it or not. Some of you couldn't believe I wrestled at 98 pounds. You probably can't believe I sang in the choir every week. And back in those days, the choir would sit up on some special seats, and we'd sit over here to the right of the stage, and I could see the whole crowd. And on one particular day, again, sophomore in high school, the hottest girl I ever seen walked into the room. She'd been transferred there with her dad. Her dad would become the superintendent of Jefferson County Schools in Ohio, around Steubenville area. And as a result, he brought with her the hottest thing that's ever walked on the earth. Her name was Brenna Dodrell. And I looked out, and I thought, and I watch her, and then I hang around her, and she had more enthusiasm, more joy, more spunk than anybody had ever been around. She also was different than me. She didn't know what it meant to have 1 foot in the dark, 1 foot in the light. She was all in the light, and there was no darkness there. And I'm thinking, I've got to have more of that. In fact, you know what? I need to marry this girl. So she later became Brenna Hughes after some strong convincing. All right? She later became Brenna Hughes, and I can tell you to this day, I am where I am who I am on this stage, and I do what I do because God placed her in my life. All right? When I first got here just over 4 years ago, when I first showed up, Brian Marburger was sitting back there. I'll never forget it. Brian said, "You didn't get this job because of you. You got this job because of your wife." Remember you told me that? Yeah, you didn't get this. And he's right. He's right. Because the zest and the zing and the energy, enthusiasm that it expands when I'm with her. Huge. Who do you have that can say that about you? That you make them more thirsty for God? Is that you? Salt also preserves. Also, long before there were refrigerators, ice, salt was what they preserved their food with. So understand who Jesus is talking to here, this audience. He's got a group of fishermen whose livelihood depends upon their fish going to the market and not rotting. What was the only way back then that they could take fish to the market and you could still eat it? It had to be preserved with what? Salt. So here's all these roughneck guys saying, "Whoa, I get this. I use salt every day. That's what I'm to be? I get it. I'm to preserve things." And if there's ever a time where our world is in a constant state of decay, if there's ever a time that you and I, as the church, need to preserve justice, need to preserve mercy, need to preserve a social conscience, need to preserve morality, it's time for the church to rise, for you and I to rise. Elections are soon to come in the future, where the morality of this country over issues continuing to be like right to life, racism, who can marry who, and on it goes. If the church of Jesus Christ doesn't preserve the Word of God and the foundations that God has established this country and life on, no one else will. It preserves. Martin Luther King Jr. put it this way: history will have to record in this period of social transitions that the greatest tragedy is not the constant clamoring of bad people, but the appalling silence of the good people. The church must rise. The church must preserve. Preserving as the challenge so strong as the Apostle Paul in Romans chapter 12, verses 1 and 2, where Paul said, "Therefore I urge you, brothers and sisters, in view of God's mercy, to offer your bodies as living sacrifices, holy and pleasing to God. This is your spiritual act of worship. Do not conform any longer to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you'll be able to test and approve what God's will is, His good, pleasing, and perfect will." Well, that's salt. Let's look at light for a moment. First of all, light dispels the darkness. Light chases the darkness out of the room. When light shows up, darkness is in trouble. Every single time. I mean, like scary movies. All right, like scary movies. When you watch a scary movie, they're pretty much all the same. Someone's going to walk towards a room, and they're going to go to and it's dark, it's pitch black. Scary movie's not scary if it's not dark. And then they start the music. You know what I'm talking about? And they're walking they're in darkness, and they're going in this room. You're already scared. You don't know if they can hear the music, but you can hear the music, and it's scary. And they walk up, and they walk into a room, open the door, walk into a room, walk right past something, and you're wanting to scream, "Turn on the light switch, dummy!" Turn on the light. But they never do. The music gets stronger, the darkness gets darker, and in they go, and it's all downhill from there. All they had to do before they walked into the room was to what? Because light dispels darkness. It chases away darkness. Jesus said, that's what you need to do. You need to be so bright, so much of a light for me, that you dispel, that you chase away the darkness that are in people's lives. You point them towards characteristics that Jesus would want to have in them. And you make a difference with the light that you give. 1 John 1, 5 through 7. This is the message we've heard from Him and declare to you. God is light. In Him there is no what? Darkness at all. If you claim to have fellowship with Him, yet we walk in the darkness, we lie, and we do not live by the truth. But if we walk in the what? Light, as He is in the light, we have fellowship with one another, and the blood of Jesus, His Son, purifies us from all sin. It dispels the darkness in us. Also, light guides. There's nothing more frustrating than being caught in the dark without a light. You weren't expecting the power to go off. It's pitch black in the house. You're stumbling around. Where's the candles? Where's the matches? Do we have a flashlight? Nothing more frustrating than being caught in the dark. When the days before electricity even existed, I heard about an old tight-fisted farmer who was getting on his hired hand because every time he went out to court his girlfriend, he would get a lantern, and back then it took fuel to make the lantern light. So he'd have to get fuel, fill up the lantern so it could light, which was expensive. So he was getting on his hired hand for all the cost. He said, listen, back in my day, when I went courting, I went in the dark. His hired hand looked back at him and said, yeah, and look what you brought back. Explain it to the person next to you, all right? That's good. It's scary to make decisions in the dark, to make decisions without a guide and without knowing the way. Paul, in one of my most favorite scriptures in all the Bible, said this, Philippians chapter 2, verses 14 through 16. Do everything without complaining or arguing, so that you may become blameless and pure children of God, without fault, in a crooked and depraved generation, in which you shine like what? Stars. Shine like stars in the universe as you hold out the word of life. As you sound the alert, you shine. Brenda and I live out in the country. There are many houses around us. They're up on top of the hill, but none near us. And so at night, when it's dark, really dark. And we like to sit out in the yard, and we'll sit out there, and I'll look up, and I'll look at the sky. And again, no other lights around, and the stars are just brilliant. They're just brilliant. The moon can be as bright as all get out down here in North Carolina. It's just so bright. Then there's a flight pattern sometimes the Charlotte Airport uses, and a big jet will fly over top, and those lights will just cast down over the sky, the brightness that those lights give. But you know the light that catches my eye the most in the darkness out there? It's a glow from a small little bug called a lightning bug. A lightning bug. In fact, the grandkids and I were sitting out there just a week or so ago, and we were looking, look at the lightning bug. There's a lightning bug. There's a lightning bug. Why does that light seem to impress me more? Because it's right there. It's close. It's right there. I got to thinking, whoa. My mind started churning philosophically and all that kind of stuff. I'm thinking, you know what? I may not be the brightest light in the world. I may not be the most brilliant light in the world. But I can be the closest light. I can get right in front of my family. I can get right in front of my neighbors. I can get right in front, right in the face of the people that I work with. And I can shine the light of Jesus Christ right here, right now. And that's exactly what we're called to do. So how do we do that? Let me give you some characteristics of salt and light people. First, they enhance God. They enhance God. You're the light of the world. You're the salt of the earth. So do your good deeds in front of people so that what? Why? So that they may praise your Father in heaven. You do these things, you act the way you do, all to alert people to God, all to send praises His way, all to show glory His way. Let me ask you ever been to a restaurant and had a great steak or a great piece of chicken, and you call the server over, and you listen, I got to ask you something. Seriously, I got to ask you, is this Morton's? Or is this the Cost Cutter brand? Because this is the best salt I've ever eaten in my life. Never do that? No, you don't do that. Salt doesn't bring attention to itself. It's a great steak, but it's a great steak because it's been enhanced by the salt. That's exactly what we're to do. Not bring attention to ourselves. And I tell these guys that are on this stage, I've told them time and time again, we are not to be performers, we are to be prompters. We're to take that spotlight when it comes on us and throw a floodlight on God. And that's what we're to do with our lives. All the time, by what we do, our good deeds, throwing a floodlight on God, enhancing God, so that people truly can taste and see that the Lord is good. Another one, salt and light people. Salt and light people work best where they're needed most. They work best where they're needed most. One little flame, one spark, one pinch of salt can make all the difference in the world if it's where it's needed most. You ever thought, why is it that God has planted you where you're planted? Maybe it's because God needed some salt there, and you're it. Maybe it's because God needed a flame there, and you're it. You work where you work. You're in the family that you're in. You live in the neighborhood that you live in. You go to the school that you go to. You shop at the grocery store that you shop at. You bank at the bank you bank at. All because that's where God needed you most to shine. To shine. And I got to thinking about this church. Why is it that we're all here? Why here? Why now? Why is it that this church is here? Why is it that Route 85 is being expanded to numerous lanes? Why is it that soon Davison Highway will be added 2 more lanes and more people are going to come by this place, come by this where we call church? Why is it we're here? We're here because God wants us here right now. To alert the people in Concord, to alert the people in Kannapolis, to alert the people in Harrisburg, to alert the people in Salisbury, to alert the people in Charlotte, to alert the people all around the world to the saving grace and love of Jesus Christ. That's why you're here. That's why I'm here. And you know what? That's why we do what we do the way that we do it. That's why we do what we do the way that we do it at this church. That's why we use the music that we use. That's why we use drama up here on this stage. That's why we have days like today, Family Sundays. That's why we use video. That's why we use relevant teaching. That's why we do crazy things like climb up a ladder and almost die in here. That's why we pass out pretzels. That's why we bring in cars, automobiles. That's why we bring in live animals whenever it applies. It's relevant teaching to bring in our culture so that they will open up, you will open up, I will open up to the life-saving grace and love of Jesus Christ. That's why we do what we do. Lynn Sweet is a guy that's done a lot of writing and research on generational things. And he shared that there's never been a generation like now where young people are so out of touch with God and want nothing to do with God. He's now in his 60s, and he was speaking one time a few years ago at a church, and he got up and he started to share. He said, I'm interested in how many grandparents we have here. He said, would all the grandparents please raise their hand? Go ahead with me. All the grandparents, please raise their hand. He said, awesome. He said, all of us grandparents have one thing in common. He said, we're all crazy. We're all crazy. He said, again, how many grandparents we have in here? Raise your hand. How many grandparents? Yeah, I'm one too. He says, how many of you love your grandkids with everything, everything you have? Raise your hand. He said, I do too. Jesus said, if you love someone, you got to be willing to lay down your life for them. He said, raise your hand again if you're willing to lay down your life for your grandkids. Of course, everybody's hands shut up. He said, I got one more question. He said, how many of you would be willing to lay down your music for your grandkids? And then here everybody's hand went up. But there, in that church, only 2 people raised their hands. I got to thinking about us. We here at Connect, I am so thankful that this is a church that has been willing to give up their preferences so that a lost generation of people can be found and saved. Because that's what it takes. There are a lot of churches in our very community who will never reach another person for Jesus Christ because it's all about them and the way they do church. And there are buildings closing up and selling all across the country because of that. And I praise God that you all are not that church and you don't desire to be that church. But you desire to be a church that shines. a month or so ago, at one of our big outreach events, the egg drop, where we drop eggs on a field and hundreds of kids are there. I was over there early and everybody was starting to come. And Glenn Bell works it every year, Glenn Bell, and you see him around here working like crazy. But every year at the egg drop, his responsibility is to bring his generator early, sit there on his generator and blow up the bouncy things for the kids to jump in. And so this year I went over and sat down with him for a while and just started talking. And kids are just pouring in, all different kinds of backgrounds, kids coming in. He says, this is awesome. This is great, isn't it? I said, yeah, Glenn, this is fantastic. He said, I'm so excited about what God's doing at the church. So excited. He said, I know some people aren't that excited and some maybe have left, and I don't understand all that. He said, but God's doing great things, and it's just amazing. Look at this. I said, yeah, it is. He said, but I got to tell you something. I said, what's that? He said, I still don't like the music. I said, all right, Glenn. I said, yeah, that's okay. I said, I don't like all the music. And he said, but you know what? It really doesn't matter. Because it's not about me and it's not about my music. It's about all these kids getting to know Jesus. If you saw me walk away from him that day, I was probably walking 3 feet higher than when I got to him. Because I was thanking God. Not only does he get it, there are so many times I want to shout honk honk to every single one of you, and yay God to you who understand that we are to be a light and salt to this world, and we're to shine for Jesus Christ and not us. One more. Salt and light people have a sense of urgency. A sense of urgency where they say, I want to be salt now. I don't really care about all the ingredients and the properties of salt. I want to be salt now. I only get one shot at this with my life, and I want to do it now. Salt and light people have a sense of urgency that say, I want to shine now. I don't want to put my light underneath the bucket. I want it up on a hillside. I want it on lamps on a stand. I want to shine for Jesus Christ now while I've got a shot at it. Because salt and light people realize that eternity is hanging in the balance. That there are people out there who do not stand a chance unless we add zest, zing, enthusiasm into their lives because of the presence of Jesus Christ in us. There are people out there, if we don't shine the light of Jesus Christ, they'll live in the darkness forever, and they'll never fully understand that they can have a relationship with a God in heaven, and they can live forever if they choose to. Eternity's hanging in the balance for us to choose to be the church. And today's fantastic. We have over 200 people in just a little while. Some have already gone out, dispensed into the community, being salt and light in all different ways, serving, getting dirty for the cause of Jesus Christ. And that's what we're called to be, the church.